Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths Canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. Hogwarts is remembered as a catalogued fortress of secrets, chambers, hallows, horcruxes, each neatly filed into legend and syllabus. In this timeline, that confidence is a delusion. They are wrong. It begins with a fall. Third year, Harry hits the Quidditch pitch at a lethal angle, bounces once, and the world dissolves into rain and ringing silence. Madam Hooch is shouting. Brooms are spiraling down, but by the time the stands erupt into motion, he is already moving, staggering, half blind, away from the pitch, blood hot in his mouth, driven by nothing more rational than the animal need to stand somewhere the sky cannot see him. He takes a staircase that should lead to the hospital wing. It does not. The stone under his hand is wrong, too smooth, like river rock worn by centuries of invisible tides. Torches line the corridor, but their flames burn without color, casting light that illuminates without warming, as if the castle itself is holding its breath. Harry, swaying, pulls the marauder's map from his robes with methodical certainty, the way a duelist draws a wand. Blank parchment, no corridors, no name, just a white void where he is standing. Hogwarts, the world insists, has been mapped, every inch. The map missed the room of requirement. Yes, but that is filed away as a quirk, an anecdote. In this corridor, that comforting narrative fractures. The greatest secret in Hogwarts was never the Chamber of Secrets, never the Deathly Hallows, never even the scattered Horcruxes that would one day turn the castle into a battlefield. It was a single door that refused to exist for anyone except Harry Potter. Not for Filch, not for the founders' portraits, not even for Albus Dumbledore. The door is unremarkable. That is the first lie. No gargoyles, no serpents, no Latin, just ancient oak set into stone that does not match any era of the castle's architecture, as if the walls had grown around it, like scar tissue around shrapnel. In this timeline, the Slytherin timeline, Hogwarts is not merely haunted, it is architecturally guilty. The founders did not build this room. They built Hogwarts around it. The shifting staircases, the vanishing steps, the classrooms that appear only when needed. These are no longer charming eccentricities. They are defensive maneuvers, the behavior of a living fortress attempting to misdirect attention from a fixed point of soul resonance buried in its foundations. A weapon being polished in the dark, not to be wielded, but to be hidden. When Harry crosses the threshold, the room does not offer power. It offers memory, no dust, no furniture, just air thick, with a pressure that feels like the pause before a spell connects. Then the walls dissolve into a scene that cannot exist. James and Lily Potter, alive, walking a sunlit Hogwarts corridor Harry has never seen, years after the date etched into their gravestones. Their laughter echoes with unbearable, ordinary authority. Lily adjusts a prefect badge. James complains about staff meetings. History says they died in Godric's Hollow. The room says otherwise. One of them is lying. Here is the hinge of this world. If Hogwarts itself has selected Harry as the sole witness to a secret that can rewrite truth, then every future choice he makes is contaminated. Does he remain the visible hero, the boy who lived, the public weapon against Voldemort? Or does he become something quieter and far more tactically lethal, the unseen architect of a narrative only he knows is false? This is the story of the room Hogwarts refused to remember, and the boy it refused to forget. The divergence, one corridor that shouldn't exist. The castle answers him the first time he runs from his mother's screams. It happens on a night canon pretends is simple. The Dementors swarm the Quidditch pitch. Harry plummets, wakes to chocolate and concern. They are wrong. In this timeline, the echo of Lily's voice does not fade in the hospital wing. It detonates into a compulsion, a thin, cutting line of terror and need that will not let him lie still under Pomfrey's watchful authority. He leaves before he is supposed to. Of course he does. Cloak half fastened, glasses still fogged from the rain, he slips out of the hospital wing and into the dim, late evening corridors, chasing a movement he cannot name, a shadow that is not a ghost, a draft that does not belong, temporal anchor. Late in Prisoner of Azkaban, the castle soaked in stormlight, the pitch behind him still a battlefield of scattered brooms and scattered nerves. Canon would have him turn left, down the familiar staircase toward Gryffindor Tower, toward blankets and whispered reassurances. In this timeline, he turns right. It is not a dramatic decision. His feet simply follow the flicker at the edge of his vision, a pale shimmer at the end of a corridor he knows, with the dull, exam-cram certainty of a third year, should end in bare stone and a dusty tapestry of a wizard teaching trolls ballet. The corridor disagrees. As Harry walks, the geometry of Hogwarts misbehaves with methodical certainty. Torches elongate their shadows in the wrong direction. The stones under his trainers shift, not like moving staircases, but like a fortress exhaling. The walls do not slide theatrically. They rearrange with the quiet, bureaucratic efficiency of parchment being redacted, lines vanishing, margins thickening, meaning withdrawn. At the dead end that should exist, the castle hesitates. Then a narrow stone archway unfolds out of what was, an instant earlier, uninterrupted wall. No gargoyles, no password, no portrait demanding lineage or loyalty, just an aperture of rough-hewn stone, edges unfinished, as if the castle has torn a hole in itself and not yet decided whether to regret it. This is not the room of requirement. That chamber is opportunistic, responsive to surface desire, a mirror held up to immediate need. What Harry faces now is older, quieter, and fundamentally disinterested in comfort. The castle names it in the only language it has, pressure behind his scar, a low, insistent hum in his bones. Later, he will call it what it is, the unwritten room. It does not appear on the Marauder's map. When, years from now, he tests it, the parchment will show only blank corridor, ink refusing to acknowledge the archway, even as he stands inside it. Dumbledore's wards do not prickle, no alarm flares in the headmaster's office. The unwritten room exists like a redacted paragraph in Hogwarts' own body, present in the architecture, yet excised from every system designed to know the castle. Here, Harry's role fractures. To the world, he remains the boy who lived, the visible symbol, the public weapon pointed at Voldemort. To the stone beneath his fingertips, he is something else entirely. The boy who is remembered by the castle, a living key whose scar vibrates with a buried, architectural soul resonance. Voldemort marked him as a Horcrux. Hogwarts repurposes that wound as an access code. When he steps through the archway for the first time, reality flinches. His watch freezes mid-tick. The torches outside the threshold halt their flicker, flames held in impossible suspension. For the length of a single strangled breath, Hogwarts forgets Harry Potter exists. Inside that breath, the Slytherin timeline is born, a weapon being polished in the dark, and a room that has finally chosen its masterpiece to be molded. Inside the unwritten room, a mind made of stone. The door seals behind him without a sound, and Harry steps into a geometry that should not exist. The chamber is perfectly circular, yet his eyes cannot find a center. There is no torch, no window, no flame, and still every surface is rendered in immaculate clarity, as if the dark itself has chosen to illuminate. The air is cool, thin, and utterly still, like the silence of an alpine summit held under glass. The walls rise smooth and pale, carved in bands of runes that look, at first, merely ancient. But when Harry's gaze passes on, when his attention loosens by a fraction, the script rearranges with methodical certainty, sigils sliding, re-knotting, erasing their own prior logic. It is only when he snaps his eyes back that the movement halts, the text frozen mid-transition, as though caught in an act it did not intend him to witness. The floor is worse. It yields under his shoes with the faint give of water, a perfectly level, perfectly still surface that should ripple and does not, reflecting nothing. Not his body, not the walls, not the world he thought he knew. In this timeline, Hogwarts has grown a mind, or perhaps it has always had one, and only now has it chosen to speak. This is not the room of requirement. This is its antithesis. That chamber listens for conscious desire and obeys. This one listens for what Harry has not yet permitted himself to want and disobeys him with precision. It does not offer comfort, weapons, or hiding places. It offers data, fragments of truth, forbidden memories, and half-formed futures are arranged around him with the clinical detachment of an academic experiment. And Harry Potter is the primary subject. The sentience is subtle at first. His occlumency-trained mind flickers, unguarded, to the word parents, and the air thickens, gaining weight like deep water. Light bends. From the far curve of the wall, a tableau condenses. James and Lily, older than their gravestones ever allowed, walking the Hogwarts grounds in autumn. Leaves skitter across a path Harry has trod 100 times, yet their conversation is entirely alien, discussing layered protections, bloodwood variants, and a form of soul resonance no book has ever named to him. He reaches out, his hand passes through them. They do not see him. The room does. Rules emerge, not as proclamations, but as consequences. It appears only when Harry is alone and emotionally unshielded, when the armor Bellatrix built around him slips, and the weapon being polished in the dark forgets briefly that he is a weapon at all. Nothing physical survives the threshold. A book he tears from a spectral shelf crumbles to dust the instant he tries to carry it out. An obsidian amulet he lifts disintegrates into ash, staining his fingers and then vanishing entirely. Yet the knowledge remains. Patterns of magic, impressions of conversations, entire sequences of runes etch themselves into his memory with tactically lethal clarity, as if the room has written directly onto his mind. They would say, a castle cannot choose sides. They are wrong. The chamber lingers on scenes that sharpen his anger, that seeds suspicion, that stretch the distance between Harry and the rest of the world. It replays Dumbledore, hesitating over a prophecy spear, Snape kneeling before two masters, Bellatrix arguing in a room Harry has never seen, calibrating his responses with the slow patience of a fortress selecting its warden. This is not neutrality. This is recruitment. The pattern only breaks when, without warning, the visions stop and the walls go blank, leaving Harry alone on the water-solid floor with nothing but his altered thoughts. The interruption is deliberate, a withheld answer forming a question. What will he do with what he now knows? The Slytherin timeline pivots here in the silence after revelation, as the room waits to see whether its chosen curator will become something far worse than a student. Year 1 rewritten. The Philosopher's Stone that was never a mystery. The room answers its own question by shattering the chronology of Harry's life. The first projection is not the troll, not the mirror, not even his sorting. It is the Forbidden Forest, weeks before he ever saw Hogwarts, rendered in cold moonlit clarity as Quirinus Quirrell kneels before a wraith clinging to the back of his skull. The wizarding world believes Harry's story begins on the boats across the lake. They are wrong. In this timeline, the unwritten room drags the camera back. Harry watches from an impossible angle, hovering above the tree line as centaurs shift uneasily and the air itself recoils from Voldemort's half-formed presence. The voice that hisses into Quirrell's ear is barely more than breath, but the intent is already tactically lethal. Penetrate the school, test the headmaster, probe the defenses around an unnamed stone. It is Hogwarts as a battlefield before Harry has even unpacked his trunk. Then, the mechanism reveals itself by indifference. There is no narrative, no commentary, only a dispassionate sequence of sights and sounds. Staff meetings in the High Tower, Dumbledore's private office, lit by candle and phoenix fire, the quick, sharp argument between McGonagall and Snape over whether a troll in the dungeons could possibly be a diversion. The angles are wrong for any human witness. The vantage points cling to buttresses, float in rafters, rest within the very mortar. The castle, Harry realizes, has been watching. The stones have a kind of sensory memory, and this room is their archive. Events he thought he knew are resequenced with surgical precision. Halloween, he sees Quirrell panic in the Great Hall. Then, in the same breath of time, sees that same man from a corridor ceiling's view, calmly slip away while teachers rush the other direction. Christmas, the mirror of Erised, is not a miraculous discovery, but a controlled exposure. Dumbledore standing in the doorway before Harry arrives, testing the enchantments, weighing risks like a general measuring casualties before a necessary skirmish. The key twist lands when the room replays Quirrell's first contact with Voldemort again, this time juxtaposed against Harry's own first-year confrontation. Canonically, he was never meant to know. The narrative was designed so that Snape the bully masked Quirrell the zealot until the final reveal. Here, the illusion disintegrates. Harry walks out of that sequence knowing that the Dark Lord's influence can seep into the school long before any resurrection. That possession, parasitism, and soul resonance are not future threats, but established tactics. The room is merciless with his heroism. It shows his collapse before the mirror of Erisade from above, from behind Voldemort's translucent overlay on Quirrell's face, from the side where Dumbledore later arrives and simply watches the aftermath before levitating Harry to the infirmary. No swelling music, no narrative of brave sacrifice, only a small boy, a dying man, and an ancient artifact being used as a trap, a weapon being polished in the dark, not a child saved by destiny. In that clinical light, Dumbledore's explanations curdle. The kindly omissions become strategic lies. Authority becomes calculation. The Slytherin timeline tightens around Harry's spine as something in him cools. He does not rage. He recalibrates. When he finally steps back into the corridor, the castle feels different. Less fortress, more machine. He forms a new habit with the same methodical certainty Bellatrix once drilled into table manners. Every adult claim, every reassurance will now be checked against what the stones can show him. Curiosity hardens into procedure. Wonder becomes an investigative vigilance, and the next time Hogwarts shifts under his feet, he will not assume it is merely magic. He will assume it is motive, but power framework, a library that reads Harry back. The room responds to that shift in him, as if it has been waiting for the question, not the boy. The next time Harry crosses the threshold, the chaos of flickering visions is gone. In its place is order, almost academic in its cruelty. The walls still hum with soul resonance, but now it is arranged into lessons. First come the memories. At the center of the chamber, panes of light rise like vertical pools, each one tagged with a date, a corridor, a choice. Halloween, first year, follow Ron or report the troll. Valentine's Day, pursue the diary or trust the adults. The room forces him to walk through each branch, to watch with methodical certainty what would have happened had he stepped left instead of right. Hermione's broken body under falling masonry, Ginny never found, the basilisk loose for another week. It is a syllabus written in bloodless hypotheticals, teaching him that courage without calculation is just a prettier form of suicide. In this timeline, Harry's famous recklessness does not vanish. It is refined. The instinct to throw himself between danger and others is still there, but the room overlays every impulse with a branching map. 5 outcomes, 3 casualties, 1 tactically lethal solution. His Gryffindor lunge becomes controlled risk assessment, a habit of seeing not one heroic path, but a lattice of consequences. They are wrong, the world that will later insist he always just follows his heart. The heart is being trained to run simulations. When he can endure those reconstructions without flinching, the curriculum advances. The walls peel back to reveal runic diagrams, not in the neat textbook rows of Flitwick's classroom, but as living schematics of Hogwarts itself. Lines of power trace staircases, vanish into dead-end walls, not around the great hall like arteries around a heart. The room names what it is giving him: architect's sight, a mental model of the castle's shifting architecture, updated every time a staircase turns or a door seals. Hogwarts stops being whimsical. It becomes a moving fortress whose blueprints live behind his eyes. Parallel to that, the silence deepens into stone listening. The lights dim until only the outlines of the walls remain, and the stone under his palms vibrates with moods: unease near the third-floor corridor, a sullen thrum around the girls' bathroom concealing the chamber. In the Slytherin timeline, Bellatrix taught him to read people. Here, the castle itself becomes another mind to interpret, another authority with tells and patterns. Then memory is weaponized. The room disassembles his recollections of Privet Drive, of Hagrid's hand on his shoulder, of the Sorting Hat's whisper, and shows him how easily a skilled legilimens could rearrange them. In response, it threads them back together in layered strands, demonstrating mnemonic weaving, stacking memories in interlocking sequences, cross-referenced by sensation, smell, and wand movement until any intrusion would snag and tear. His mind becomes less a diary and more an encrypted archive. The psychological conditioning is not gentle. His parents' deaths replay not as a single nightmare, but as a sequence of altered parameters. Voldemort aiming first at James, then at Lily, then at the crib. Cedric's future fall is rendered in slow motion, again and again, with variables toggled. Harry shouts sooner, stuns instead, refuses to share the cup. The outcome is always a body. The room's tone is clinical, almost bored, until his immediate horror dulls into a cold, compartmentalized ache. He does not feel less. He learns to shunt the feeling sideways, to build an internal fortress where emotion is quarantined from decision. There is a cost. It appears first in his speech. Sentences tighten, qualifiers vanish. His questions to teachers become scalpel precise. He starts observing people the way he observes staircases, measuring angles, cataloguing tells, noting who lies and how often. Around Ron and Hermione, he begins to hold back, not secrets of affection, but fragments of information. Not yet. About the room. About everything. Prophecies half-mentioned. Suspicions unstated. Knowledge, in this timeline, is no longer a story shared around a common table. It is a resource to be curated, allocated, denied. A weapon being polished in the dark will always start to reflect less light. The room is not merely teaching Harry how to survive Hogwarts. It is quietly teaching him how to outgrow it, and the next time Dumbledore looks into his eyes, he will not immediately recognize what has been rewritten behind them. Year 2, when the chamber wasn't the only thing that spoke. By second year, that unreadable glint in Harry's eyes has a habitat. The unwritten room has been listening. As the castle descends into whispered panic, filthy messages on stone, cats, and classmates frozen in grotesque tableau, the room begins to answer a question Harry has not yet articulated. When he first hears Parseltongue hissing through the plumbing, the walls themselves shiver, mortar vibrating with a low reptilian resonance that does not belong to the wind. That night, the ceiling peels back into a blurred vision, a subterranean corridor, wet stone sweating under torchless light, ancient sigils crawling across the archways like scars that never healed. Hogwarts is offering him an X-ray of its own bones. In this timeline, the diary does not arrive as an inexplicable curse artifact. It arrives as a case study. One evening, when Harry enters the room with ink still on his fingers from detentions and questions, the floor darkens into a liquid mirror. Above it, an impossible overhead angle blooms. Ginny Weasley alone in the library, shoulders hunched, writing furiously into a small black book. No sound, no context, just the mechanical repetition of her hand and the way her posture slowly collapses inward, as if gravity has discovered a new direction. Then the image fractures, the book's pages flare white, and Tom Riddle's face rises out of the reflection. First the charming prefect, then, frame by frame, older, hungrier, his edges blurring, as though the memory itself cannot decide how many pieces he occupies. For a heartbeat, Harry is looking at something that is not quite a boy and not yet a Dark Lord, a masterpiece to be moulded that has already been carved into Horcruxes. They would say this is just a cursed diary. They are wrong. The room never gives him a full map of the chamber, only fragments, water slicking across flagstones where no pipes should burst, a trail of spiders fleeing in a frantic single-file exodus toward the forbidden forest, a reflection in a glass cabinet door, a colossal, scaled shadow gliding past, never revealing its gaze directly. Harry stitches these partial images together with methodical certainty. A serpent that moves through walls and pipes, a killing stare that must be deflected by reflections, water, glass. He reaches Hermione before the curse does, warning her not as a frightened friend, but as a tactically lethal analyst of a living weapon under the school. The timeline bends. Hermione is ready with mirrors and notes instead of lying petrified. Another student takes her place on the hospital wing's silent row. Survival here is an allocation problem. Then the room escalates. It presents Harry with a choice, a doorway labelled only by sensation. On one side, the merciful blur he has known so far. On the other, a promise, undebited. He steps through. What follows is not a vision. It is a dissection. Ginny's possession is shown in merciless continuity. The first time the diary writes back, the incremental erasure of her handwriting. The moment she comes to herself in corridors with red on her hands and no memory of how it got there. Riddle's voice in her head is calm, patient, instructional, like a professor of despair. When the vision ends, there is a new line etched in Harry's internal architecture. He does not only hate Voldemort, he now hates the architecture of ignorance itself, the way adults curate horrors into bedtime stories. The unwritten room has become a fortress against curated narratives, a weapon being polished in the dark that aims not just outward, but upward, at authority. On the eve of the descent into the chamber, the room breaks its own pattern. As Harry grips the imagined outline of the basilisk's path, the walls flare white, and for a single, impossible instant he sees Tom Riddle again. Older now, snake pale, holding a wand that is not his, in a graveyard Harry has never stood in, surrounded by robed figures whose faces he cannot yet name. The image snaps off mid-incantation. The message is brutal in its simplicity. Killing the basilisk will not end this war. The chamber is not an endpoint. It is a prologue, and as Harry steps out of the room toward the pipes, he does so knowing that somewhere ahead in the Slytherin timeline, that graveyard is waiting for him by design, not by accident. The castle's dark mirror, a new Voldemort takes shape. He does not know it yet, but the moment Harry walks toward the pipes, the castle begins rewriting its own future. In canon, Voldemort evolves in near isolation, a disembodied strategist treating Hogwarts as a nostalgic backdrop. In this timeline, they are wrong to assume the castle is passive. The unwritten room has created a feedback loop, a dark mirror in stone. Each time Harry enters, listens, and adjusts his choices, warning McGonagall earlier, trusting Luna sooner, diverting Ron from reckless heroics. The ambient magic of the fortress recalibrates. Fewer casualties mean different griefs. Different griefs mean different fears. And Voldemort's scattered fragments, designed to exploit predictable human ruin, now find themselves operating in altered emotional weather. The diary is the first to encounter this new climate. When Harry destroys it in the chamber, the event does not end at the fang-piercing enchanted paper. The basilisk venom tears through the Horcrux, and as Tom Riddle's soul resonance detonates, the scream does not simply vanish into the chamber's damp air. The unwritten room, older than the Marauder's map and less honest than the Sorting Hat, records it. A residue of Tom's magical signature laces itself into the walls, thin, echo-like, but precise enough that when Harry next sits in the room's central silence, he feels a pattern. Not memories, a rhythm of intent. It is the pattern of a boy who believed Hogwarts itself would always love him more than it loved anyone else. This is the pattern interrupt. For the first time, Harry is not only reading the castle, he is reading the shadow that once tried to own it. He begins to anticipate moves that have not yet been played, a diary that was more than a diary, a cup that would not merely sit in a vault, a snake that is never just a snake. The castle does not tell him names, but it sharpens his paranoia into methodical certainty. Voldemort, on the other side of the chessboard, feels the disturbance as a flaw in the ritual script. The diary's end is not a clean severing. It is an architectural interference, a drag in the wards around his remaining Horcruxes. He cannot name the unwritten room, but he recognizes the signature of stone remembering what it should forget. His resurrection in the graveyard therefore shifts. Blood, bone, and flesh are joined by new protections, words braided against architectural magic, occlusive veils against memory-based intrusion, counter curses designed to blind any fortress that tries to observe. He becomes, in effect, a shadow that learned to distrust stone. In this timeline, Voldemort stops treating Hogwarts as a battlefield to be occupied and begins treating it as a semi-sentient adversary that has chosen Harry as a weapon being polished in the dark. Direct infiltration, cursed defense posts, diary gateways, slow corruption of corridors, loses its appeal. Instead, he pushes outward toward broader systemic decay, ministry departments quietly sabotaged, international alliances destabilized, werewolf packs armed months earlier than canon. If the castle is a fortress favoring the boy, then the war must be dragged beyond its walls. The consequences are brutal and paradoxical, because Harry's altered choices prevent certain deaths and scandals. The chamber resolved with fewer victims. The diary discredited before it becomes public spectacle. The ministry's denial phase stretches. Fudge clings to authority. The prophet soft pedals anomalies, and Dumbledore's coalition mobilizes more slowly. Pressed by this extended silence, Voldemort initiates open conflict sooner, before Order safehouses, Hogwarts defenses, and international support are fully aligned. The war arrives earlier, sharper, less ceremonially announced. The Slytherin timeline therefore curves toward a confrontation where both sides are upgraded. A castle that has chosen a masterpiece to be molded, and a warlord who has learned to corrupt the world beyond its reach. The next moves will not be played within school year rhythms. They will be played on a clock Voldemort himself has accelerated. Year 3, time turners, prisoners, and a room that hates paradoxes. Year 3 arrives like a snapped wire. Time itself has been overclocked. Hermione's time turner is not merely a study aid in this timeline. It is a hairline fracture driven straight through Hogwarts' ancient spine, and the unwritten room is where that fracture becomes visible. The first sign is subtle, then it isn't. Harry steps through the door one evening, after a day of double lessons and triple lives, and the walls are wrong. Stone that was once a steady, muted grey now flickers between shades, as if lit by torches that do not exist yet, or have already guttered out. He watches his own silhouette cross the far wall twice, slightly misaligned, a delayed echo of motion. Déjà vu stops being a feeling. It becomes architecture. The castle has always been a fortress of fluid geometry, staircases shifting, rooms appearing and vanishing. But this is different. Here, memories replay out of order. A first-year Neville sprinting past a fifth-year Fred, a future Quidditch match bleeding through a past snowstorm, McGonagall scolding an empty patch of air where a younger Harry should be. The room stutters, trying to reconcile overlapping timelines, and the result is a low, teeth-on-edge hum, a kind of magical tinnitus. In this silence, Harry understands that soul resonance is not just between people. It can exist between a building and its own past. Before the shrieking shack, the instability sharpens into something curated. One night, the chaos falls away, and the walls resolve into a single, lucid tableau. Teenage Sirius, James, Remus, and Peter in the Gryffindor common room. No sound, no subtitles, only the violence of their gestures. James is furious. Remus is pleading. Sirius is incandescent with betrayal. And Peter is small and hunched, his eyes flinching away from all three with a guilt so naked it feels like a confession. The image freezes on his face. Harry, who has been handed a world where Sirius Black is the definitive traitor, feels the first hairline crack in that narrative. They are wrong, the room implies, without words. After the Time Turner rescue, Harry walks back to the unwritten room with methodical certainty. He has saved Buckbeak. He has saved Sirius. He expects the castle's memory to have updated, cleanly, like a ledger balanced after a dangerous transaction. Instead, he opens the door onto nothing. Not darkness, not absence. A blank, humming silence, as if the room has been scrubbed of that night entirely. The stone is smooth, unmarked by any projection. When Harry reaches for the walls, the magic recoils, not violently, but with the firm, cold refusal of an authority that will not be negotiated with. For the first time, the room says no. In the Slytherin timeline, this denial cuts deeper than any revelation. Harry has been a weapon being polished in the dark, accustomed to leverage hidden vantage points and forbidden knowledge. Now his greatest informational asset refuses to acknowledge the single most dangerous intervention he has ever made. There is a domain, he realizes, where foreknowledge cannot follow, where war must be waged without rehearsal. The lesson is brutal and simple. Some rescues cannot be previewed. Some risks must be taken blind. As he turns to leave, the room slips once, just once. On the far wall, for less than a heartbeat, Azkaban appears, not as the intact monolith the world still fears, but with its outer walls spider-webbed with fractures under a roiling, unnatural storm. Stone buckles, wards flare and fail. Then the vision is gone, leaving only the echo of a prison that has not yet fallen, and the promise that even the darkest institutions in this world are not built to survive what is coming. Year 4, the graveyard, seen before it exists. The Azkaban vision dissolves, but its after-image lingers in Harry's mind like a migraine aura. The unwritten room has shifted register. It is no longer content to show him what the world has already survived. It has begun to preview what it intends to break. That change becomes undeniable the night the goblet of fire is lit. The instant blue flame roars up in the great hall. Buried stone far below answers with a sickly, phosphorescent green. Runes along the unwritten room's walls ignite one by one, not in their usual cool silver, but in a color that looks diseased, as if the castle itself is developing a bruise. Every time Harry crosses the threshold, pressure blooms behind his scar, a low mechanical thrum, as though Hogwarts is bracing for an intrusion it cannot name. In this timeline, the Triwizard Tournament is not a spectacle, it is a countdown. The projections that follow are fragmented, mercilessly neutral. An angel-topped headstone under a sky the colour of old parchment, a cauldron, iron and deep, smoking in hues no natural flame should wear, petrol blue, curdled violet, a green that matches the runes. The outline of a wand hand, the fourth finger missing, moving with methodical certainty through a ritual Harry does not yet have language for. None of it is labelled. The room offers no commentary, no comfort. Past and future are arranged side by side with the same clinical detachment, blurring into a single, continuous war. Harry reacts as Bellatrix trained him to, not with panic, but with preparation. If the room will not explain, he will operationalize. He studies the graveyard stone configurations, the crooked angel, the obelisk with a chipped corner, the way the paths between markers twist. When the maze is raised for the third task, he walks it like an echo, quietly avoiding any route that even whispers of those patterns. In private, wand in hand, he forces the room to replay flashes of unfamiliar curses arcing across that unseen cemetery, and then, in the silence of the dungeons, he tests counters, shields, transfigured barriers, turning glimpses into drills. He enters the third task not as a boy thrown to the wolves, but as a reluctant operative, tactically lethal, expecting betrayal as a probability, not a betrayal of faith. On the eve of the task, the room offers him one final deviation: the same graveyard, the same angel. But this time, Harry does not move. Cedric falls alone, a flash of green swallowed by the fog. Voldemort rises unopposed, pale and new and exultant, his first command carrying, like a sermon across the stones. The vision holds, forcing Harry to watch the world pivot around his absence. When it releases him, his choice is no longer simply how to survive. It is whether to confess this prelude to Dumbledore, to Cedric, to anyone, or to hoard it as data for a longer game. The Slytherin timeline fractures along that moral fault line. A weapon being polished in the dark must decide how much of the dark it will share. The third task unfolds. Hedges close in, spells flash, footsteps converge. Harry's hand closes on the Triwizard Cup, palm meeting cold metal, already humming with stolen intent. The projection ends there, black, and somewhere beyond the cut, a portkey wakes, and a boy who has watched his own death once removed is about to meet its source face to face. The hidden war with Dumbledore. Knowledge as a negotiation. When Harry staggers back from the graveyard in this timeline, the first place he goes is not the hospital wing, not even Gryffindor Tower. It is down into the castle's forgotten arteries, to the unwritten room that has been his silent witness and co-conspirator. It is different. The air is thinner, as though the stone itself has been holding its breath. The walls, once smooth with that unnerving liquid sheen of soul resonance, are now veined with hair-fine, glowing cracks, like a masterpiece under too much pressure. Light leaks from them in slow pulses, each flare answering some invisible disturbance in the wider fortress of Hogwarts. For the first time, Harry has the sense that the room is not merely hiding him from the world, but hiding itself from something older and higher in the castle's hierarchy of authority. The pattern clarifies days later, in Dumbledore's office, under the watchful gaze of too many silver instruments. Harry asks, in what sounds like idle curiosity, whether Hogwarts has places it hides from itself. Dumbledore's hand stills on a spindle-legged device. His eyes flicker, not with the vague confusion of an old man, but with precise recognition and immediate caution. In that pause, an unspoken admission: this is not the first time the castle has outgrown its own map, because above them, in a locked tower, the Book of Admittance and Quill of Acceptance have begun to complain. Canon insists they only record births. They are wrong. In the Slytherin timeline, the book has a secondary function. It logs architectural anomalies, spatial echoes that behave like children, appearing, vanishing, demanding magical resources. Harry's repeated disappearances into a non-mapped space register as a stuttering entry, a nameless presence entering and exiting Hogwarts without ever crossing a boundary. With methodical certainty, the book escalates the anomaly. Dumbledore can no longer pretend it is a quirk of moving staircases. So he calls Harry in. The conversation begins with condolences and ends as a quiet war. Mid-sentence, Dumbledore's gaze sharpens, and a thin, cold pressure brushes the front of Harry's mind. Legilimency, gentle as a winter draft under a door. Under any other circumstances, it would slide in, but the unwritten room has been weaving Harry's memories into braided lattices. mnemonic weaving that treats thought as a weapon being polished in the dark. The probe hits a surface that flexes, then seals. Harry feels the direction of the intrusion, pinpoints it, and, without knowing the word occlumency, denies entry. The rejection is clean, instinctive, tactically lethal. Dumbledore flinches. In that instant, the roles invert. Harry is no longer a student begging for context. He is a witness guarding a source. He lays out partial truths like bargaining chips. The graveyard, the rebirth, the hint that Voldemort has anchored himself in objects that behave like corrupted cousins of the room's own memory cores. He withholds the architecture, the mnemonic weaving, the way the castle itself seems to be choosing him. His terms are simple: autonomy and non-interference. The room remains untouched. In exchange, he remains an informant, irregular, inconvenient, but uniquely positioned. Dumbledore accepts because he must. Yet his acceptance is its own strategy. He reframes Harry's continued presence at Hogwarts as a containment protocol. The boy becomes a living Trojan horse, a conduit through which the unwritten room's knowledge might one day be steered or neutralized. Better the anomaly within arm's reach than vanishing into the dark. The bargain holds, for now. But every compromise in this war over hidden knowledge is also an infection vector, and the castle is still deciding which mind it will ultimately inhabit. Friends, fractures, and the weight of what only Harry knows. The infection spreads first where Harry is weakest, in the quiet assumptions his friends make about who he is and how he reacts to danger. In this timeline, the unwritten room does not simply feed him information. It begins to re-script his reflexes so that crisis feels less like chaos and more like an exam he has already revised for. Ron notices it before he can articulate it. A staircase shifts, and Harry is already stepping back before the first stone grinds. A Filch patrol turns the corner, and Harry has them sidestepping into a disused classroom, seconds before the lantern light spills across the floor. Duels in corridors, arguments in common rooms, even Quidditch brawls. Harry cuts around them with an almost clinical economy, anticipating outcomes and avoiding escalation with methodical certainty. To Ron, raised on a world where bravery is noisy and improvised, this new, surgical calm looks like arrogance, like Harry has been briefed on a war plan no one else was trusted to see. The silence between them lengthens. Jokes land on stone. Hermione, by contrast, does not feel excluded from a joke. She feels excluded from a library. She watches Harry predict corridor shifts with the same ease she predicts exam formats. Hears him identify obscure hexwork in detentions without ever having checked the relevant volume, and notes, because she always notes, that his guesses about when Filch or Snape will appear are not guesses at all. They are wrong, she realizes. Those who still insist Harry is simply lucky. This is pattern. This is design. For a mind that has always believed any mystery can be dismantled with the right book, the implication that there exists a source of knowledge she has not been told about is not just unsettling. It is betrayal. It cuts deeper than any insult Draco Malfoy ever managed. The first fracture line becomes visible the night Harry tries to mend it. He brings Hermione to the corridor, counts the paces, feels the familiar prickle of soul resonance where stone should remember him, and the wall remains blank. No door, no seam, no flicker of acknowledgement. The castle, which has opened like a fortress gate for him alone, refuses her entirely. Hermione watches his face shift from confidence to confusion to something uncomfortably close to fear, and in that interval, the authority of his new, tactically lethal composure collapses. Either he is lying, or he is losing his grip on reality. Both options lodge in her like splinters. He was trying to bridge the distance. The gap widens instead. When the Order reforms around whispered prophecies and half-known Horcrux lore, the problem scales. Harry sits at a table crowded with veterans of the First War and withholds. The room has shown him specific methods, how Voldemort tests wards, which bloodlines he is quietly eroding, the experimental curses that never made it into any Auror manual. But Harry offers only broad warnings, trajectories, without coordinates. To Moody, this smells like recklessness, the arrogance of a boy playing strategist with lives he doesn't yet understand. To Snape, it reads as manipulation, a weapon being polished in the dark, choosing which truths to drip feed for maximum leverage. Dumbledore, watching more carefully than either, reads something colder, a deliberate assertion of independence, a masterpiece to be molded that has decided it will mold itself. The room answers his isolation with visions. Alone within its unmarked walls, Harry watches a projected future unfurl across the stone. The great hall shattered, banners burned, sky open to war. At the centre stand Ron and Hermione, opposite ends of a broken aisle, wands raised, not at Death Eaters, but at each other. No context, no cause, just the moment of impact, frozen. Harry feels the weight of every withheld detail, every half-truth, settle like dust on his shoulders, and wonders whether his secrecy is the first stone in that avalanche, or merely the last one he will still have the power to move. The room does not answer. It only shows him the next image. Horcruxes, hallows, and a room that knows the shape of souls. What it shows him next is not the future at all, but contamination. Harry steps into the unwritten room with the locket hidden under his shirt, its chain burning a faint, irrational line against his skin, and the castle reacts before he can name why he is there. The air does not merely chill, it thickens, as if the stone itself is trying to clot. Silence implodes. Every surface bows inward around the invisible gravity of the Horcrux. Then, the walls scream without sound. The runes that usually glow with soft archival gold convulse into a violent jagged red, their shapes warping as if the script is being torn mid-sentence. The floor vibrates in pulses that match his heartbeat, then fight it, an anti-rhythm trying to push the locket away. In this timeline, the first true rejection Harry experiences at Hogwarts does not come from a person, but from the building itself, spitting out a foreign body it refuses to absorb. He drops the locket. The chain hits stone with a noise that feels too loud for the room's sealed acoustics, and the red flares brighter, framing the Horcrux in a cage of light that is not light, more like exposed nerve. This is not detection in any spellbook sense. This is soul resonance, an immune response from a fortress that remembers every footstep it has ever borne, and knows, with methodical certainty, that this soul does not belong. Hogwarts, he realizes, does not simply stand. it accumulates. The unwritten room is not an archive of events, but of impressions, the slow, geological layering of presence on stone, where Voldemort has carved his soul into jagged fragments and hidden them in objects like landmines. This room is the opposite principle, self-bound to place through continuity, not mutilation, a memory that preserves without tearing. The walls shift, and the pattern of red collapses into images. The founders appear, not as portraits but as overlapping echoes. Salazar tracing a circle on bare rock. Helga arguing that children must never be bound to their own fear. Rowena dissecting the difference between legacy and immortality. With surgical diction, Godric insisting that death is the final proof that power was ever real. Their debate about anchoring self to stone plays out in layered fragments, an ethical symposium fossilized in magic. Intercut jarringly, wrong, are flashes of Voldemort, a boy in the orphanage basement, a young man in the room of requirement, an older monster before a cauldron. Each time he splits his soul, the unwritten room flinches, as though the castle watched and could not intervene. They are wrong, Harry thinks suddenly. All those who believe Horcruxes are merely dark mechanics. They are an argument against the world itself. So he turns the argument. From that night, every suspected Horcrux candidate passes through this chamber first. A ring, a cup, a diadem, even the idea of Nagini, each is brought in, tested against the castle's recoil. When the runes stay calm, he discards dead ends before they can become tombs. When they spike into that jagged red, he knows the hunt outside these walls is not a guess, but an execution scheduled in advance, tactically lethal. The pattern should reassure him. It doesn't, because slowly, between tests, the room begins to form a different image. Hogwarts itself, mapped not in stone but in veins of light, converging here, as if this chamber is a heart. Not a Horcrux, not a wound, but a concentration of awareness, a soul object in an ancient, non-destructive sense. And when its runes calm only when his hand closes over the locket, when its panic eases only at his touch, Harry understands the more unsettling choice. The castle has already picked a side. Worse, it has picked a champion. In the Slytherin timeline, a weapon being polished in the dark is not forged by Bellatrix alone. Hogwarts itself has entered the war, and it has decided whose hand it will steady when the final curse is cast. The final siege, when Hogwarts fights back. When the war finally comes to the castle's gates, Hogwarts is no longer neutral terrain. In this timeline, it is a coiled predator, and Harry is the nerve it has chosen to fire. The night before Voldemort's siege, he returns to the unwritten room for what he already understands may be the last time. The walls do not offer memory this time. No parents laughing in borrowed echoes. No founders debating in spectral council. Instead, the stone brightens into cold architectural diagrams, staircases ghosting between positions, corridors cross-hatched in red, choke points blooming like wounds. Every suit of armor in the castle flares as a dormant rune cluster. Every window is annotated with wind vectors and curse trajectories. It is not nostalgia, it is war planning. Harry stands in the center as the overlays shift, feeling a low soul resonance hum through his bones. The castle is thinking. More, It is inviting him to think with it. Here, a staircase can be sealed to funnel Death Eaters into a kill box of animated tapestries and constricting walls. There, a forgotten passage can be widened for evacuations, its exit veiled by a timed illusion keyed to his heartbeat. The room does not speak, but the silence is directive. It is the silence of a general waiting for his adjutant to confirm the plan. When he emerges hours later, he is not simply the symbol the world expects. They are wrong. He is an architect of defense. In McGonagall's impromptu war council, he offers suggestions with measured understatement, never once naming his source. Shift the younger students to the lower dungeons, he advises, because the upper corridors will become artillery lanes. Lock the viaduct entrance, but leave the courtyard edge deceptively weak. The stone there is thick enough to be collapsed on command. To the staff, it looks like intuition sharpened by experience. In truth, it is the Slytherin timeline's most dangerous alliance, a weapon being polished in the dark, and a fortress that has decided to be sharpened alongside him. As the siege begins, the unwritten room becomes a hidden nerve center. Each time a Horcrux falls, Hogwarts shudders in a visible exhale. Torches flare higher. The staircases stabilize for crucial seconds. Portraits straighten as if a migraine has eased. When a student dies, the opposite occurs. The walls leach color, lanterns gutter, and the room's diagrams smear at the edges, as though the castle itself is grieving and enraged. Through that resonance, Harry tracks Voldemort's probing advances, a pressure at the northern towers, a probing curse at the boathouse wards, a feint along the covered bridge. He redirects defenders with methodical certainty, arriving half a minute before disaster, again and again, as if reading the future carved into stone. Voldemort has prepared for architectural magic. He has not prepared for malice in the masonry. He expects stone to be passive. They are wrong. Those who told him Hogwarts merely shelters children. Corridors lock behind his strike teams with a soft, definitive click. Staircases reroute mid-charge, depositing masked killers into pockets of concentrated resistance. The Great Hall itself becomes a subtle accomplice. Its floor tilts by imperceptible degrees, nudging curses off true, rolling dropped wands towards desperate students instead of Death Eaters. This is not the room of requirement performing parlor tricks. This is an ancient institution choosing sides. And then, at the apex of the chaos, Harry understands the cost of being chosen. As he walks alone toward the forbidden forest, the castle's noise receding behind him, he glances once toward the corridor where the unwritten room waits. The doorway is already sealing, stone knitting over stone, with slow, surgical finality. His link to the diagrams, to the shuddering grief and exultation of the walls, cuts off like a severed nerve. For the first time since third year, the future is not sketched for him in advance. The room will not show him what comes after the killing curse lands. He has to decide, in that sudden, absolute ignorance, whether he is still willing to die without seeing the memory of his own aftermath. Behind him, somewhere deep in the castle's bones, something very old changes its mind about remaining only a fortress. After the war, a curator of truth in a world that wants forgetting. After the forest and the scream and the falling silence, the world insists that the story is over. The boy who lived walks out of the war alive, Voldemort is ash in the wind, and Hogwarts is framed in the public imagination as a wounded but uncomplicated fortress of light. They are wrong. Years later, when the rubble has been magicked smooth and the portraits have agreed on a curated version of bravery, Harry returns to the castle as a guest, not a student. It is in this timeline that the unwritten room decides it is not finished with him. There is no dramatic door, no blazing sigil, only a corridor that feels one step out of phase with itself, a stretch of wall that his body remembers before his mind does. A wrongness, like a half-heard name. When he steps through, the air hits him like a pensieve turned inside out. The walls are no longer sparse. They are crowded, layer upon layer of the war, pressed into stone. Snape's last Patronus, the flash of Fred's fall, McGonagall signing an order she hates, a Death Eater lowering his wand instead of killing, memories that never reached a basin, waiting to be claimed, waiting to be arranged. The room has not slept. It has been recording with methodical certainty. In the First War, Harry was a weapon being polished in the dark. In the second, he was a symbol being spent in public. Here, in the aftermath, the castle offers him a third role. Curator. The unwritten room reveals its final function. Not prophecy, not warning, but editing. Threads of memory shimmer at his fingertips. With a thought, he can dim one, brighten another, lock some behind metaphorical doors that only the headmistress can open. The architecture of Hogwarts' collective memory, the stories the building itself will reinforce in every creak and echo, is laid out before him like a manuscript. Outside, the ministry is already doing its own revision. Commissions are formed, testimonies are streamlined. Dumbledore's miscalculations soften into noble burdens. The Order's compromises blur at the edges. Statues rise that turn a chaotic, morally compromised resistance into a clean legend of unity. Harry sits alone in the unwritten room and watches the official ceremonies play out as spectral tableaus on one wall, while on the opposite side, the unedited cut runs. Children screaming in corridors, Slytherins shielding first years, Death Eaters hesitating when they recognize neighbors. The pressure is not overt. It never has to be. Kingsley's envoys suggest, with grave courtesy, that the world needs coherence more than nuance right now, that too much truth could fracture a peace held together by trauma and exhaustion. The temptation is brutally simple. Let the room align itself with the ministry's narrative. Let certain memories sink, and the castle will teach future generations a story that hurts less. This is the post-war dilemma, sharpened to a wand point. If he uses the room to surface every buried compromise, Dumbledore's manipulations, the Order's cruelties, the cowardices of the so-called heroes, he risks shattering the fragile authority that keeps former Death Eaters in check and keeps grieving families from turning on each other. If he does nothing, if he allows myth to calcify over fact, he becomes an accomplice to a quieter violence, the erasure of those who do not fit the legend. In the Slytherin timeline of this castle, because Hogwarts itself has its own soul resonance, its own evolving character, history is not just written by the victors, it is architected into the walls by whoever the unwritten room accepts as its master. Harry, who once begged for any glimpse of his parents, now has the power to decide which children will ever see the truth of theirs. So the question turns outward, to us. Given a room that can show any truth but cannot guarantee the world is ready to bear it, what would you preserve? What would you blur? What would you quietly let die? Because the next decision Harry makes in that hidden corridor will determine whether Hogwarts becomes a monument to comforting lies or a masterpiece of remembered pain that refuses to let the war be simple. Closing the door, what we risk when we look behind the walls. In this timeline, that choice in the corridor is the true divergence. The moment the boy who lived stops being a reactive protagonist and becomes a quiet architect. From a single misstep, a door appears that should not exist, a sliver of absence on every map and in every headmaster's memory, and the unwritten room begins its work on him with the patience of geology. A child chasing a shortcut comes away with a lifetime of secret knowledge. Across the years, that hidden syllabus rewires the war. Harry no longer stumbles into plots and survives by instinct. He curates them. He enters the chamber not as a desperate second year, but as a strategist already briefed on basilisk vectors and parcel-tongue thresholds. He faces the Triwizard Maze not as a pawn, but as someone who has watched prior tournaments play out in spectral replay. By the time Horcruxes surface, he is not discovering the concept. He is cross-referencing, a weapon being polished in the dark, but this time by the castle itself. Hogwarts, in this reading, is not a backdrop. It is a mind, a vast stone memory palace that has been recording every argument, every spell, every betrayal, since the founders first bound their quarrels into its foundations. The unwritten room is simply the place where that mind edits itself, where inconvenient recollections are quarantined until the world is ready, or never will be. When it lets Harry in, it is not granting access, it is appointing an editor. That appointment is power. It is also indictment. Each time Harry chooses what to reveal and what to bury, he is negotiating the boundary between transparency and protection, between a Hogwarts that functions as a fortress of truth and one that survives by curated amnesia. Dumbledore, accustomed to holding the master narrative, feels the authority slip. Voldemort, deprived of certain myths that once fueled his aura, becomes less a prophecy and more a solvable problem. Even the castle's shifting staircases begin to feel less whimsical and more like a nervous system rerouting around pain. But the human collateral remains. Ron, who once defined himself against Harry's legend, now has to reckon with a friend who withholds timelines and outcomes with the same ease others hide sweets. Hermione, who worships knowledge, finds herself standing before a library that has chosen someone else as its reader, and the fracture in her trust cuts deeper than any curse. The Order learns, too late, that being lied to for noble reasons still brands the soul. Some scars have no counter-curse, only distance. They would say this makes Harry wiser, gentler, safer. They are wrong. It makes him necessary, and necessity is rarely gentle. So the door closes, for now. The unwritten room recedes into rumor and architectural superstition, and the boy it chose walks the corridors like a living redaction. Yet the question lingers in the stone. If there is one room Hogwarts refused to remember, how many others might exist, paired to other students, each quietly revising the Slytherin timeline? the Gryffindor legend, the entire resonance of the war, a chamber that answered only to Tom Riddle, showing him futures in which he won. A sanctuary bound to Snape, archiving every compromise until even he could not bear to look. A sanctuary of impossible creatures that recognized Luna Lovegood as its only translator. If Hogwarts is a mind, then we have met only a fraction of its thoughts. So this is where we hand the quill to you. In the comments, map your own forbidden architecture. What other unwritten divergences do you want to see? A room that armed Riddle with different obsessions. A vault that made Snape tactically lethal. A tower that turned Luna into a seer the world refused to believe. Tell us which hidden corridors to explore next. Which souls to bind to which doors. And if you want to be there when we pry open the next seam in the castle's memory, subscribe, stay with this channel, and step back into the dark with us the moment the next door appears.